with brotherhood, from sea to shining sea.
He's the participant and he is a counterfeiter. There should be a picture on Time magazine with him flying a helicopter pushing out money. Congressman, he's known for saying that he's helicopter banned.
Aloha mai kako, you are watching Hawaii Political Reporter.
Aloha, and thank you for watching Hawaii Political Reporter. Tonight, Harry Kim talks about geothermal and doing government right. We will also find out why America needs a handyman. But first, we'll start with what the heck is a bank bailout, on how the current monetary system is unsustainable and rigged against the average person.
Bailout? Bailout? What the heck is a bailout? I can bail out my boat. I can bail out my no-good brother-in-law. But what the heck is a bank bailout? Or a government bailout? These are good questions, aren't they? Because, like a very nasty infectious disease, there is a lot of this going around. To understand bailouts, first we need to understand what money is today. And that's no easy task. Not because it isn't basically simple. In fact, it is so simple, people simply don't believe it. The difficulty is that we have been taught some very dangerous make-believe and have to clear away ingrained but misleading ideas embedded in the language we use to talk about banking. Today, money is not valuable in itself like a gold coin, and it isn't just printed by the government, as the news footage would have you believe. Money is debt, all of it, even paper cash. All of it was created simply by a promise to pay it back in money. The only money that isn't created as debt is coins. The government mints coins and sells them at face value to the banks. Cash and coin are what are known as legal tender, the only real money that the courts will enforce as payment of a money debt. Despite the misleading term deposits, bank accounts are not a box at the bank where your legal tender is deposited. Bank accounts are just promises of legal tender on demand. Your bank account is an IOU, pure and simple, and an empty one at that. Bank accounts are just a record of what the bank owes you in legal tender cash if you ask for it, and most of us never do except for small amounts. All of our big transactions we do by transferring bank credit itself. In most developed countries, 97% of those bank promises are promises of legal tender that does not exist. So where does legal tender come from? It comes from the central bank of the nation. Some central banks are privately owned. Some are owned by the public. Both supply the legal tender of the nation by printing up paper cash for the cost of the printing and then using that cash to buy interest-bearing national debt at face value. Member banks have accounts at the central bank that are also legal tender on demand, but credit at the central bank is a promise of legal tender that does exist or can be printed upon request. So why do banks need bailouts? Well, because a bank loan is a promise of legal tender that the bank does not have. This promise, the bank credit, was created in exchange for the so-called borrower's promise to pay it back. This balances the bank's books. If the bank's promise of legal tender isn't returned to the bank and extinguished, the bank can't reissue this debt as a new loan. It has to stay within its risk limits and government regulations. Banks must make loans to stay in business. When money is created as debt, the economy needs a constant stream of new bank loans to prevent a disastrous crash. Why? Economists don't seem to have an answer. That's because they are oblivious to money being created as debt. They are even more oblivious to the fact that this bank credit money, once created as one debt, gets lent again as existing money. Taking these rather obvious possibilities into account, there is a very simple explanation that anyone can understand. Every dollar created as debt by a bank gets lent a second and a third time as existing money. Once paid back to the bank, that debt money no longer exists, but the second and third debts of it still do. Unless bank lending creates enough new debt money on time, the second and third borrowers will default by mathematical certainty, because the money to pay their debts does not exist. However, banks cannot force borrowers to take these loans. When borrowers refuse to borrow enough new money into existence on time, for any reason, the money supply shrinks and everyone is in danger of default and taking the banks down. Too many defaults will soon push the economy toward collapse. Therefore, when too much bank credit is not returned to the bank, and the bank is too big to let fail, the bank must be bailed out so that it can continue to make its so-called loans. The national taxpayers must go even deeper into debt, at the point of a gun actually, to create more legal tender or base money for the banks to base their promises on. But many governments are already hopelessly mired in perpetually increasing debt. And, adding to the problem, just the interest payments on this debt already exceed the willingness or ability of the taxpayers to pay it. So, to pay government debts, governments are forced to sell even more bonds. Who do they sell them to? The same banks that have no money. This system is a kind of insanity with some magic thrown in. Banks that have no money suddenly have lots of it when government sells them bonds because it is the taxpayer debt that creates the money. Going ever further into debt to pay off past debts is like trying to escape a hole by digging deeper. Now, who can bail out a national government that can no longer sell its own sovereign debt to bondholders? Only the taxpayers of other national governments can, by selling more sovereign debt of their own. But that just puts them further into debt. In fact, because money is debt, it is quite possible for everyone to be hopelessly in debt to banks, despite the unprecedented real wealth in the world, which we, the so-called borrowers, created. The banks don't create wealth, so why are we in debt to them? The truth is that banks create money as money debt and steal real wealth with it. And for as long as this money as a promise to pay it back system continues, there will be no escape. The bankers can take everything. To comprehend how today's money system works, watch Money as Debt and Money as Debt 2, Promises Unleashed, and read up on the subject at moneyasdebt.net. There is an alternative. It is the liberated alternative people have resorted to whenever money was scarce. It was a beautifully developed local economic system in medieval markets, and with today's technology, it can be global and local at the same time. To understand the amazing potentials of adopting an entirely different concept of money, please support the author by visiting moneyasdebt.net.
He paid his way through college as a handyman, growing that small business into the largest construction company in the state with 1,000 employees and a reputation for ethical behavior. He's an Ironman triathlete, an avid cyclist and outdoorsman, an adventurer who summited Mount Everest with frostbitten toes and a leg still healing from a recent break. During his 2 terms as governor, he did what people in office rarely do. He kept his word. A Republican, he was re-elected in a state that votes 2-to-1 Democrat in a landslide. He vetoed wasteful spending 750 times, cut taxes 14 times, reduced the size of state government through better management instead of layoffs. He left the people of his state with hundreds of miles of new highways, new schools and bridges, improved state services, a balanced budget, and $1 billion surplus, all without raising taxes a penny. He's fiscally conservative and socially cool. GQ magazine declared him the sanest man running for president and described him as absurdly honest and smart. He will be on the ballot in all 50 states come November as an alternative to Mitt Romney and Barack Obama. His name is Gary Johnson. Gary Johnson isn't the norm in politics, he's the future. Gary Johnson can fix the America the 2-party system has broken. He's a handyman.
My name is Gary Johnson. Be libertarian with me for one election. Live free.
A noise in the sky. A drone. Kids playing.
A report from top American universities last month said drone strikes create fear among ordinary people, damage the credibility of the US, and even help armed groups recruit more fighters. And although exact figures are hard to find, the report estimates that hundreds of civilians have been killed by drones in Pakistan in the last 8 years. Caroline Malone, Al Jazeera.
We hope that by participating in this caravan that we'll be showing that the Pakistani people, that there are Americans who are vehemently opposed to these policies, and we hope that we'll be putting pressure on our own government to take a look at the policy to see how inhumane they are, how many innocent people are being.
With me now is Harry Kim, the one and only, running for mayor. Harry, could you tell us why you're running and what are the main issues that you think are important now?
I know some people are going to have a hard time believing this, but up till June, before the deadline to file, I did not want to run. I was convinced I wasn't going to run. A couple of things happened in June that made me decide to run, and those were very, very important issues. And there's one basic principle of what I'm going to say, and that is, if you can keep in mind, of home rule. First issue that came up, it was brought to my attention by someone in Oahu, that why did I not get involved in Act 97? And I didn't, quite frankly, know what Act 97 was.
I don't either.
It was Senate Bill 3003, and basically what it was, and I tell you, to this day, as I'm talking to you in the audience, I'm still taken back and surprised, disappointed, and yes, even a little disgusted in regards to the passage of Act, not the passage of Act, but the signing of Act 97, Senate Bill 3003. As you know, once it's signed, it becomes an act. So I refer to it now as Act 97. And what they did, and I need all of the viewers to really not trust what I say and take the time to look it up. And what they did was eliminate all geothermal subzones on the island of Hawaii. There was only one area in the island of Hawaii of geothermal subzone, meaning you can drill for geothermal in that area. And as we know, it was in the Lower Puna area where the present geothermal well is, and further on towards the ocean. not only did it take away a geothermal subzone that was designated there in 1984, in its place, and I mean it, in its place, it designated the entire state of Hawaii geothermal subzone. In short, making it able to drill for exploratory. They think that's a nice catchword, that this is not a production element, that you are allowed to drill for exploratory geothermal anywhere in the state without a permit. Please check me out on that, except for conservation lands. And in conservation lands, you would need a permit by the Department of Land and Natural Resources in Oahu. When I saw that, really, I could not believe that it had occurred. I did have attorneys check it for me and read it for me and make sure that before I said anything publicly, that this was true. And I need the public to realize the consequence of that. Drilling for geothermal, exploratory geothermal, seems to be a catchword. Well, it's only exploratory and it's not production. I need every one of the viewers to do some time in checking out what is exploratory geothermal drilling. A drilling, for the most part, will encompass drilling 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, averaging, I don't know if there's an average, but I would guess to be anywhere from 4,000, 5,000 feet downwards to 9,000, 10,000 feet. How long does exploratory drilling takes place? Weeks, months, before they determine whether it's a positive place or a negative place. I need people to understand that taking away or signing of Act 97 allowed drilling companies to come in with the permission of the property owner to do this. I need you to think very carefully what this means in regards to Hawaii. And this is taking away any home rule element, because the signing of the passage of Act 97 took away all home rule in regards to the county, the planning commission authority in regards to geothermal permitting. And what takes its place? Basically the state. And in regards to that, because you take away all local control or home rule. When that occurred, the governor heard that I was a little disturbed about it. And he gave me the extreme courtesy of calling me to ask me what my problem was in regards to that. And I will tell you, I told the Governor, I cannot believe that you have done this to the people in the land of Hawaii, to allow these things to happen. And that we can do this anywhere in the state of Hawaii, of ag lands, urban lands, rural lands, without a permit system. I asked him one favor, and I have not heard from him since. And naturally, since this aired, I'm going to say what I can remember, what I told him. I said, Governor, I asked you one favor. There is so many misconceptions about geothermal. And I was one of them initially, because this is something new to most of the people in Hawaii, and we know very little about it. And you believe what people tell you. I asked him that with his extensive background in Congress, he must know a lot of people in California. I asked him that not to listen to me, not to listen to the pro-geothermal people here, not to even listen to the anti-geothermal people here. I asked him to please contact those in California who are responsible for geothermal in regards to monitoring and enforcement of rules and regulations, and to contact them and to ask them, this is what I signed, what do you think? I said, I think you'll be very, very surprised at what you will discover as far as the difference of geothermal of Hawaii versus California or even Iceland. And I'll cover that very briefly here. Iceland and California geothermal is what they call as clean steam or white steam. Hawaii geothermal is referred to as what they call hot rock or magma geothermal resource. The difference, in California, nature creates the energies of geothermal. You have, I'm sure, seen in person or on film or pictures where the geysers in California blows up every so many minutes on a very systematic time. Why is that? Because nature creates the situation where water, underground water, is provided in regards to being heated up and blows up after a certain pressure is reached. In Hawaii, that is not true. In Hawaii, and going back to that, the residue of that geothermal resource is basically water. And so most of it, though not all of it, can be poured right back into the groundwater system with no problem. In Hawaii, you can't do that. The residue of geothermal in Hawaii, because it is hot rock magma, you have a tremendous different element in regards to the residues and after effect of geothermal. And one of them is hydrogen sulfide.
That's a tremendous difference, okay?
It is a tremendous difference, and it is one of the most misunderstood, miscommunication, misinformation that is out there. And truthfully, I cannot even understand this because we are talking about the safety of people. We are talking about safety and an impact on the environment. I mean, forget whether you're for or against geothermal. There should be one common denominator. I don't care what it is. It is of government responsibility to do things right for the protection of the people.
Yes, sir.
For protection of the land.
Harry, I think also you hit something else that is tremendous. I mean, again, like you said, whether you're for it or against it, home rule, because I mean, people are going to be affected out there. I mean, maybe it is going to be something they could do right, but I mean, gee whiz, shouldn't we at least carefully listen before? This is gigantic, and I've heard people say that, you know, this is a lava zone 1, okay, that they're going to be trying to do this in, and isn't that in itself, I mean, that's got to tell you there's extreme danger there, especially on an industrial scale with high power and everything else going on, wouldn't you imagine?
I'm going to digress a bit. And you stop me if, you know.
Sure, no problems.
The night before, I was asked to go to a place and talk to some people in Kalapana. As you may know, my last job before this was civil defense.
That's right.
This was back in 1990. One of the saddest moments, I will tell you that the experience of Kalapana Kaimu changed me forever in regards to how I saw things, of people, of land, but mainly just of people, meaning of government, and what we do or don't do. It was a very sad night. Lava was coming towards a beautiful, beautiful place known as Harry K. Brown Park. There was a lot of people there. They knew that the place would be covered by lava in due time. I asked, it was dark, and I asked all of the people that were sitting there, and there were a few hundred of them, that if you are not of this land, will you please leave and let the people who are of this land have their last quiet moment with a place they call home. And very obediently in regards to respect to the people there, people left, and I was so elated that they left. We didn't have to order. We asked them to please leave people alone in their thoughts of what is happening, because this was their home for the most part. A lot of them for life. Their families' graves were there. They could tell you who planted what coconut tree and those kind of things. And as I sat there, because my responsibility was make sure that they get out of there before they come in harm's way. And I remember sitting next to some gentlemen of Hawaiiana. I didn't know what to tell them. I mean, what do you tell people that are going to lose their home, their land, and all they know? And I told them I was sorry for what was happening. And to this day, I remember this gentleman, among others that were there, he said, "Harry, don't feel bad, because we're okay." And I thought, how can he say that? If you know this place, it was a very, very special place. And we were there for literally weeks on hand as more and more was covered by lava. And this was one of the last places because many, many homes were already covered. And he said, because government have already destroyed this place. And then, I listened to him. I didn't understand what he meant. He said it was government that built that pavilion, a nice park, and the pretense was for us. And they made a cesspool, and people, about hundreds, would come by the weekend, and he pointed to this pond. He said, "That was our keiki pond, Harry. Well, our keikis learned to swim in this shallow pond." He said, "Cannot, because of pollution." from the pond you government guys, the pavilion you government people built for us. And he asked me this question, he said, do you come here weekends sometimes? I said, once in a while. Yeah, I said, not too often. And he goes, well, can you remember the last time you came? Did you see any of us here? And I know a lot of them. Putin's my home. And I told him, oh, well, usually it's very crowded. He said, that's what I'm talking about, Harry. People from all over come to enjoy what the government built. This wasn't built for us. This was built for people. And he said, before that, what happened? Government zoned this whole area resort. They were going to build hotels and different kind of things here. They didn't ask us, is this what we want for a home? They went and did it. Whether it's totally true or partially true, this is what they felt. And he kind of smiled and he said, but Billy took care, nature took care, because we had a huge earthquake of 1975, and the whole place sank. Mm-hmm. And, obviously, wisdom of money people, we can't build that. And he said to me, now Billy is claiming this land. We accept it. And the sadness was mixed with acceptance. And the thing, I learned a lot of lessons, but the one thing I learned is government. This is no different than geothermal.
That's right.
If you are going to do something that impacts people that live there, don't you have the responsibility to talk to them? Don't you have the responsibility to engage them in a discussion to explain fully what this is all about with a total trust from them, of you, that you are telling them the whole truth?
I think you're talking about it's called human decency. That's really what it is. Okay, a little bit respect to the individual. You're talking about old style. I've probably been on the islands about 14, 15 years total, but I think I felt enough. It's called aloha. It's called a little bit of love, instead of just being steamrolled over like a piece of dirt. So I understand what you're saying, Harry, and I think a lot of us do.
Look at the people down there that was affected by the blowout of 1981. I would say I am, till this day, quite surprised of the attitude of people who classify them as, just a few anti-geothermal. There were initially, records will show you that they were not against geothermal. They trusted us in government. It is us of government that let them down. I challenge every single one of your viewers here to take the time and review. Look what happened when they started that experimental geothermal well that made it into a production well. Lasted until 1998, where the governor ordered it shut. Go find out why, and all the situation that built up where the governor ordered it shut.
Harry, we're talking specifically about geothermal, and it's gigantic, because if Honolulu does want to make us the energy center, and basically to me it's exploitation. It's actually organized, legalized plunder. That's what's really going to happen here, because to me, my opinion, not necessarily Harry's.
I need to make it real clear that the whole issue here is not pro or against. The whole issue is the responsibility of government in doing things right. And that is the whole issue of my position on geothermal. Government has its responsibility, and the main issue here I was trying to point out to people for years, and I do mean years, is that all I ask is that you go and look at what California has established in regards to the monitoring and enforcement and rules and regulations for clean geothermal energy versus Hawaii's, which is classified as hot rock magma geothermal, which the spin-offs of it is quite different in regards to hazards to people and land.
Coming soon, part 2 of our interview with Harry Kim.
In 1913, the money power of the country was taken away from the people, but it was given up in the Federal Reserve Act. The Federal Reserve is no more federal than Federal Express.
You try a hide and destroy a freedom man. You seek agenda, we know you anti-American. You come forward American Constitution. 1913, up in the system. Devalue dollar, hyperinflation. The Federal Reserve, controlled by Lucifer. He can see you lying.